Hello and welcome to another episode of the Chronicle podcast. I'm your host, Dave, educator, co-founder of Chronicle Creations, and today's topic is why boys stop reading and what science says that we can do about it. This is often a kind of silent struggle that it's treated as though it's a foregone conclusion that boys just aren't as involved with this, and you see examples in popular media, right? Like even on The Simpsons, it's Lisa that is considered the bookworm, and then you have Bart, who's the rebellious never reader. And it could lead you to the assumption that this is just the natural state of things, where it's not. If you do a little bit of the research, you discover it's developmental, it's more to do with nurture, how we actually treat reading for girls and boys, that ends up having the outcome of boys reading far less and boys having far less success because of that. And what's really exciting, though, is, of course, when we do the research and we understand the needs that boys have, that you can totally address this gap that exists, and you can do it in a fun way. So I'll open up with a little lead in here for you. So across every developed country, girls outperform boys in reading, and they do so from the very first years of school. This gap, already visible by age 4, isn't just a trend, it's a global pattern that widens with age. Today's episode is going to break down why boys fall behind, and more importantly, how science says we can fix it. We'll unpack about 11 different ideas and some hard truths and some great solutions. And with, as I say, kind of this hopeful vibe that this is not a foregone conclusion. This is not something we need to throw our hands up in the air and think it's just, there's no cure. You can make a huge impact, and I think in a lot of families and in a lot of schools, you could have an improvement in everybody's life to take part in this greater development for males, for boys when they're reading. So let's just go with a few hot topics, kind of like some themes that we'll get out of this. Why boys are born behind and how to catch them up, how schools silently punish boys' behavior, the boring book trap that turns boys off, they lose interest, why dads are literacy's secret weapon, the screen time effect that rewires motivation, what works better than rewards, and then a little bit of real life examples where there are places around the world that have actually implemented these changes, become aware of the science, and then seen some really cool results as of having gotten them into their schools. So let's begin. Born behind by 6 months. Here's the problem. By preschool, girls are outpacing boys in key language schools, often by 3 to 6 months. They have stronger phonemic awareness, larger vocabularies, and better verbal fluency. This isn't just trivia, it affects everything. A few months lag in early literacy means boys start school behind and may never catch up. So it's hitting these guys as before they've even got to school, and then if you start behind, we'll get into it a bit later, that can snowball into something even worse. So what we know about fixing this, if you're thinking, how can I, as a parent, best address the fact that it's likely simply developmentally that my child is going to be, without intervention, a little farther behind the girls? Well, what we know is that the best tool we have is structured phonics-based instruction. Early and explicit, according to Ep.3 2001 study, systemic phonics isn't just effective, it's essential for closing early literacy gaps, especially for at-risk readers. So where boys struggle a little bit, if boys struggle a lot, this is the most impactful way that we can catch them up, is addressing the question of phonics. So there's all sorts of ways that you can do phonics and do them in a way that boys would find engaging. So game-based phonics is a great way to do it. I think this is one place where I'll say, like, maybe this is good for boys, but I think it'd be better for girls as well. You see a lot of classrooms, I've been in a lot of classrooms where phonics lessons can often amount to, you've got the A to Z, this is the most basic level. You got A to Z up on the screen, and then you simply go through the letter sounds like apple, repeat, And nothing could be more boring, honestly. So if you can actually add something into this, like game-based stuff, you'll have a lot of fun. So that could be anything like letter sound bingo, rhyming treasure hunts, songs, clap-alongs, anything like this. I mean, a simple one, you do this for learning the alphabet in younger grades, you do this in ESL classes, is you hide the letters around the room. You could just as easily hide the phonetic sounds around the room. And now because it's a game, it's much more engaging for the kids and they want to learn the phonics rather than just sit still, be quiet, and repeat the sounds after me. Make it about something and you'll see better results. Among those methods that you could also include with it is multi-sensory learning. So that's just a fancy way to say, don't just make the sound, associate the sound with something else. So for example, tracing letters in sand while sounding them out, jumping for every syllable. I had mentioned the scavenger hunts that you could do as well. So there's a whole bunch of different ways that you can make phonics and as the fundamental decoding block that they need to get through for reading fun and engaging for boys, and then very likely can catch them up in this early part of their development where it's so crucial that they not fall further behind. So the next one. This really has to do with kind of, again, it's that school systems are catering usually only to one mindset or one type of learning style, rather than being aware that even if you can't do things individually, at least you could see within the genders that there are different ways that we learn. And if you approach them more uniquely, case by case, you're going to get a better result. So the title that we could give this one is Sit Still, Fall Behind. So here's the problem. From preschool onward, most classrooms are built around stillness. Sit on the carpet, stay in your seat, eyes on the board. But boys on average are more physically active and less compliant with these norms. It is not bad behavior, it's developmental. It's that boys simply move around much more, and rather than tuning the system to the boys, we want the boys to tune to the system. Where when we're trying to teach them and assist them with what makes sense for them, it's kind of counterintuitive. So when learning environments reward quiet compliance and penalize movement, boys disengage fast, especially during reading time. And over time, this mismatch between energy and expectation becomes a barrier to literacy. So that's the problem. Boys are more physically active, less compliant. They want to move around much more. So what can we do about that? Do we throw our hands in the air, or is there a fix? So the fix, the research is clear. When you let boys move, they learn better. And that's not just in PE, it's during reading as well. So one proven strategy is readers' theater. So readers' theater, I had to, when I was doing the research, I was like, is that some complex thing? Like, is this Shakespeare? What's happening when you're doing this? It's not. Readers' theater is very simply making reading active. And that can simply be that when you allow a child, if you're getting your boy to read, that you get them up and they can move around as they're doing it. And they could be simply moving when they're reading, or they could be gesturing as they read. In any way that you can build a kind of physicality into the reading session, you're likely going to get a better response. You get this link of motor function into what they're getting off of the page. They're not twitching and fiddling because they've got all this energy that isn't going anywhere. They're integrating it into the experience, and we see great results from this. You don't pressure them to memorize. The point is to make reading vocal, performative, and fun. And studies show it improves fluency, comprehension, and even motivation, especially for boys who might otherwise dread sitting with a book. So you might have thought that because your child sat and hated it and didn't like reading when they were sitting, you might then think, oh, they just don't like reading. But that again is not necessarily the case. It's more the style of reading that you're doing, which is punishing them, where they may love reading if it were channeled through this different kind of experience. So here's another great example. This kind of plays off of what we were doing before, talking about how important phonics is. how you could make it a little bit more physical, but there's this other, this cool term here. It's called kinesthetic phonics. So again, it's kind of like this fancy term for combining movement with sound. So instead of writing letters, you could have kids form these letters with their bodies, and that physicality, again, links it to muscle memory and for greater retention later on. Instead of saying a syllable, we mentioned before that you could be jumping up and down for syllables in a word, and that anchors the language in their memory. And then you've got other things too that just allow a bit more movement and not to have to be so still, which are things like standing desks. That can make a huge difference as well. I don't know that we can change that necessarily in the schools yet, because they don't, not that I've ever seen, again, my teaching experience is in Japan, but standing desks are absent, and I don't see them entering the classrooms anytime soon. But you could consider it at home, that if you were encouraging reading, that you might give your child a standing desk to be able to read, is another way of addressing this physicality that could be lacking and the reason that they're not getting into it. So this next one that we'll go into here, it's a little bit sad, but again, it's addressable. It's something that it were far sadder if these things existed and there were nothing that we could do about them, but we clearly can. So the title for this is Boys Are Read to Less and They Lack Role Models. It's not very fancy, not particularly viral. It's just simply the truth. It's facts. So here's the problem. By age 3, boys are already at a disadvantage. Only 29% are read to daily compared to 44% of girls. This early exposure gap shapes vocabulary, listening skills, and narrative understanding. But it does more than that. It kind of shapes your identity and your relationship with reading. So boys far less than girls see role models when they're reading. So there's some crazy statistics regarding elementary school, and this isn't a disservice to women, that 99%, just a huge amount of teachers there are female, and then therefore any role model that reads is always female. And so I think it's great that we have so many passionate women who are going into the education system and raising our young children. Wonderful, that's great. But what it does create, as I'm mentioning here, is this absence of a male role model for reading, which then creates a kind of disconnect. So boys grow up seeing reading as something quiet, domestic, or feminine, and they opt out because they can't identify with it. There isn't as close that association to themselves personally. So there is a fix, of course, and it's quite simple. So to close the gap, we need two things: early exposure and visible modeling, especially by fathers and other men. There are programs. There's one that's called Reach Out and Read that show when caregivers make reading a daily habit, kids, especially boys, this is not ever always to say it's only just boys, it's just especially effective with them, especially boys enter school with stronger language skills. But when fathers take the lead, the effect is even more powerful. Boys begin to see reading not just as a task, but as a part of life. This isn't about perfect pronunciation or literary taste, it's about presence. And there's some really cool things that you could do here. So I think I want to add in my personal tip for when we talked earlier about the energistic quality that young lads have and how difficult that can be for them midday. This is a great chance for if you're going to read at night. So that's a point, no matter what child, they've burnt through their energy. I've got my two brothers. They have, my eldest brother has 3 kids. My middle brother has 2 kids. And by the evening, they are crashing. They're very active kids. And it's at that point that they can chill out, and they can calm down. And so it would be a great time for, if you've got a rambunctious child and you didn't get a chance during the day to read to them, that a father could sit down with their young son and they could read to them. So you can kind of harness the fact that they've calmed down a little bit and you are likely finished your activities as well. So you have this opportunity. You can read to them before bed. So you don't have to read for an especially long time either. This is true of practice in general. It is not about the pure quantity in a single session. It is about consistency, and whether that's language acquisition, whether that's eating well and getting results in the gym. If you are able to consistently read to your child every night, you're going to see really good results. And so I think this is a great opportunity for fathers to take the lead at the end of their day and just read, 5 or 10 pages to your kid. I think it's really cool. My dad, I've mentioned it before, he read to me like a number of books, but he read Lord of the Rings to myself and to my brothers, and at different times. And currently my middle brother is reading through Lord of the Rings with his boys, and they love it so much, and they will reread the section that he has read to them, and then he won't let them read beyond that, of course, but they enjoy it so much that they're actually rereading it afterwards. So I thought that was really cool. It matters. So there are other programs that I found. There's one called Real Men Read and Fred, Fathers Reading Every Day, that create a space for this visibility. There's father-son book clubs. I think if you ever could, it's harder if the age gap is too far apart. Usually it needs to be enough that a brother may want to read to a younger brother. But there are also, you could have this opportunity in schools. When I went to my high school, they literally had something called like Older Brothers, and it was a chance. We didn't read specifically, but we'd get together for a pizza night, and the senior grades were partnered with the younger grades, and they just ask you how you're doing, and you'd have that kind of camaraderie. It's really cool. So these clubs matter. Any sort of initiative that can get more visibility so that boys see men reading and then think, well, if that guy reads, well, then maybe I could read, because it's just easier to identify them, is incredibly impactful, and it's well worth doing. So the more boys see men reading, the more likely they are to do it themselves, not because they're told to, but because they've seen it modeled as normal. And when that happens early, before reading is uncool, and that narrative takes hold, we don't just catch boys up, we keep them in the game. So it's well worth just the pure quantity. Read to them when you can, and give them actual male models that also read. It's also important, I think, as well. It's not just that men would read to their child, but it's really simple, monkey see, monkey do, that if your kids see you reading, that, from what I was seeing in the research, is also really potent. So it's a good reason to cultivate reading in yourself, and you'll never do yourself a disservice to read a little bit more. So let's us men and fathers read as much as we possibly can and be visible doing so for our children, and it could make a great impact. Okay, next one. This is interesting. So let him read what he loves. So here's the problem. Many boys can read, they just don't want to. Why? Because the books offered in early education often don't match their interests. School lists tend to favor fiction, emotional introspection, and quiet realism, but boys, especially reluctant readers, often gravitate towards nonfiction, humor, comics, action, kind of gross out humor. Like, I think my eldest brother's son, he loves like Captain Underpants, oh, how gross, how weird. But he loves that series. And so when only the right books are the ones that are available, boys tune out. And when reading feels irrelevant, they leave literacy behind. They're just not interested in it. So it is a simple fix in this case, is that choice matters, and to allow boys to choose books according to their interest rather than assigning them to them can have a huge impact. And any reading matters. So this is great news. It's that if you thought there was some disadvantage to allowing them to read like a Lego manual, if you thought that there was some disadvantage to comic books, there is not. It is like, the point is to read, and it doesn't matter what they're reading. So the right book is the one that they want to read. That's another way that you could say it more simply. So there was a research from Guthrie and Humanick in 2004, and initiatives like Guys Read show that when boys are allowed to choose texts aligned with their interests, sports, biographies, joke books, graphic novels, did I say? Graphic novels, Lego encyclopedias, that's where the G came from, even Minecraft manuals, they read more, understand more, and come back for more. actually think about it now, this is a lost memory for me. I think joke books are incredibly effective, and there's some that I think are kind of sacred texts in a lot of homes that are great, and they're simple and they're relatable. So I'm going to say number one, even though I had a preference for Garfield, is Calvin and Hobbes. This is like, I'll take that moment here in the podcast to talk personally, and what I think would be a great example that I've seen, it just connects with boys, is Calvin and Hobbes. It's really fascinating that I'm quite certain that the author of that never did any merchandising either. So he kept it pure, focused on the children that it was going to impact. And I'll read that today. Like, I love Calvin and Hobbes. It's philosophy hidden in children's jokes. It's incredibly good. And so the point remains, just let them read what they want to read, and don't be so concerned about the particular topic. Like, if you get a child interested in reading and it begins with Minecraft manuals, it's because they've learned to enjoy reading that they could then have an interest in the classics later on. But if they have no interest in that to begin with, and you say, you know, we should read the Most Dangerous Game, or we should read The Giver, or whatever these classics are. The Giver's a great book, by the way, but if it's forced upon them, then it doesn't feel like it's theirs, and they disconnect from it. So we can let them choose and see no risk to their growing fluency. In fact, whatever they choose is going to contribute to that. So let them choose. Let the boys choose the books they want to read, no matter how silly or unacademically seemingly aligned that they are. The success is in that they would read at all. So here's another one. This one I find very interesting, is the effect of screen time, that your son he'd rather watch than read. So here's the problem. If your son reaches for the tablet instead of a book, you're not alone. According to a recent survey, 72% of kids say that they'd rather watch a screen than read a book, and boys lead that trend by a wide margin. Screens offer instant stimulation, fast cuts, sound effects, no friction. Reading, even when fun, requires effort, patience, and quiet. Over time, high screen exposure reshapes brain system rewards, making books feel dull by comparison. So this sort of dopamine dirge, that we give our children when we give them too much screen time is affecting their attention. So what can we do about this? It is not to eliminate screen time entirely at all. It's more that we would create a balance with this. You don't have to no longer allow your child to pick up an iPad and watch whatever show might be interesting to them, be that Bluey or Babar or Clifford the Big Red Dog or whatever it is. That's not the point. It's that you can create balance here. And then the whole point is that your brain was plastic in the first place, this neuroplasticity, that it evolves its reward systems and its interests and its habits, is that it works in both directions. So if they're losing attention, it's like going to the gym. You can train the muscle of attention by balancing it. So what you can do for this are simple little tips. It's things like creating designated reading windows. So if you're going to say, all right, you're going to have a little bit of screen time today, if you want to go on and play Roblox, what we're going to do before that is 20 minutes of reading. That's one thing that you can do. You can do on weekends, if they've got screen time, it's going to be dependent on the fact that you would read together first. So do that. Modeling. So this is really important. It's kind of an example of practicing what you preach. If you're going, it's actually incredibly important, because children are well aware of hypocrisy. They know it immediately. It is innate to every human being that if you act like a hypocrite, then you'll lose their trust. And so the modeling aspect of this is that if you have told your child that there is such a thing as too much screen time, we must be diligent and we must be mindful of the fact of how much time we ourselves spend on screens. So a great way often to reduce their interest in screen time is to reduce your interest in screen time. And because they're like, okay, this big creature that occupies my life every day seems to have a modeling behavior which also aligns with what they've told me to do, the chances that they'll actually buy into it are way, way higher. You have a much higher chance of success as a result of that. So the other thing that you can do as well is just try and minimize the junk that they're experiencing when they use those. So don't have autoplay, like limit it to a specific thing that they want to watch. Setting time of day limits. So, I mean, especially important, this is a little tip for us when we know that we're trying to go to bed and not stay up so late. Definitely reducing screen time as kids head towards bed will make them sleep better, will make them more well adjusted in the morning. And so that's something else that you can do for approaching this. So it's important to give boys agency when they choose their book, their reading spot, or you use a timer they control, resistance drops. So like you could say, you can even involve them in the conversation. So, you know, like, what do you feel like is a reasonable time? If they can come up to that level and say, well, maybe if you let me go on my screen for like 45 minutes, again, the fact that you involve them in the process means that they're more likely to commit to it. And overall, what we get from this is that the brain is plastic, and with consistent reinforcement, even screen-obsessed kids can regain their attention span and reconnect with stories. So maybe that's another really important point, is it's this all is lost kind of feeling that we get, that it's intractable. They've become so obsessed with their screens that there's no way out. Simply not true. Any habit that we've learned can be unlearned, and any new habit can take its place. So it's kind of like this idea, you hear Arnold, and he talks about going to the gym, and a lot of people are impressed by that. But his response is often to say, you know, it's not that impressive because I've just addicted myself to it. It just so happens to be a healthy addiction. I think it is by the same mechanism that we get addicted to anything that is unhealthy that we can just as easily get addicted to things that are healthy. So this is to say that we can tune ourselves to more positive behaviors, and it is never that it is fated that you would end up lost in your obsession with screens. So the next one that we have here, revisiting a little bit the idea of falling behind. So it's this accumulating effect. So the title is, he's already falling behind. So the problem, the biggest reading gap for boys doesn't open up in high school. It opens in grades 1 to 3. Research shows that boys who fall behind in these years often never fully catch up. Why? Because reading is compound interest. If you struggle early, you read less, learn less, practice less, and a downward spiral known as the Matthew effect, which is that idea of that the rich get rich, the poor get poor. So it's compounding. This, like it says, it's this compound interest that if you already struggled, well, then that means that you're going to be a little more hesitant, you're going to read a little less, you're going to progress a little less, and then that's going to become a much bigger problem as the years go on. And so we can address this, though, where it has a lot to do with a sense of accomplishment and tuning. So the fix for this is you want to have accessible success. There's a mouthful. When boys can read something interesting and achievable, confidence builds and the cycle reverses. That's the power of differentiated level texts, materials that adjust for reading ability without sacrificing topic of appeal. In a landmark study by Torgerson, 2006, it found that using leveled high-interest books dramatically improved fluency and reading scores in grade 3 boys who had fallen behind. So it's just tuning. It's that there's nothing wrong with reading at your level. It's this sweet spot that we experience, again, with all practice. It just shows up here as well when it comes to reading, that we're bored if something is way, way too easy for us. We are defeated if something is way, way too hard for us to do. And there is this sweet spot where it's challenging, but not so challenging that you can't find wins. You can't get successes with it. So what we should do is let struggling readers access grade-appropriate topics written at easier levels. Again, don't see this as a moment of defeat. It's just tune to what their needs are. That's kind of the whole theme of this, is that tune to the individual needs of the readers, or in this case, the boys. That's fine. Offer graphic novels or heavily illustrated text with mature themes and simple vocabulary. So I'm always looking to drop book recommendations while I'm making these podcasts. So what I would highly recommend for young boys, easily between the ages of 5 to 8, would be any graphic novel from the Discworld series by Terry Pratchett. Rest his soul, an amazing man. His books are incredible. They're just great. They're hilarious. This is the case where laugh out loud funny actually means something. When I read his books, they have that effect on me. But I will never forget getting the graphic novel Mort when I was younger, and I must have reread that so many times. So I'm doubling and tripling down on comics as being a great source for boys, because they're visually engaging. They're usually a lower bar to entry because they're not so text heavy. And it's a great way to also make it theirs, because you can have a serialization of a series where comics go issue by issue. And then if your child starts to collect books, you're on a good path. And that's something that can occur as a result of encouraging graphic novels as a reading source for them. So what else can we do? This is also important. It's that, as I mentioned just before, as you tune down to whatever their level is to catch them up so that they don't feel defeated by the difficulty that they're facing, whatever you do not overcorrect. Do not overcorrect. Do not give them books that they will see as below them, because that could easily be done as well. You assess a child's ability and you're like, oh, if we're going to make this lower, we got to make it way lower. Don't do that, because kids are smart in their capacity. They're incredibly intelligent, and they will know and they will feel that, and it will make them turn off just as quickly. So you want to build momentum, you want to build fluency, and you want to build comprehension, and you want to get motivation spikes. So once they believe they can read, they actually start doing it. Confidence is a prerequisite for progress. That's more concise than anything I've said. That a child be able to think of themselves as a reader makes them a reader. And so give them those opportunities to see themselves as that by the careful choice of the reading material that you present them with. So this is really interesting. I like this next one. So boys need a reason to read. I was like, isn't that obvious? But then no, not necessarily. We what is the expression? Autotelic. That you would do something for the purpose. It's just the doing of it that is the point. Boys don't work like that immediately. Boys usually need something to happen, or to see like, I've done this because of this. There is a cause and effect. So here's the problem. Many boys don't just read to read. They read to do something, build something, win something, finish something. So when reading is framed as an open-ended chore, read this chapter and answer the questions, motivation crashes. The assignment feels abstract, disconnected, and pointless. So boys are going to tune out as a result of that. It isn't laziness, it's wiring. Research shows boys are more likely to engage when reading when it serves a visible goal. So if you don't have a goal for them, they're not going to have a spark for it. There is, of course, a ton of really fun. That's why I say if the solutions are fun, that's what also makes this very hopeful. There's a fix. What works is purpose-driven reading, literacy tied to real-world tasks, hands-on projects, or challenges. In a Guthrie research on concept-oriented reading instruction, or CORI, they found that reading anchored to a project or goal significantly improved boys' comprehension, motivation, and retention. Very cool. So what are examples? Like, what does that mean? We got to have a goal. What are we going to do? Well, here's a couple for you. So read about volcanoes, then build one. Do some paper mache. We're going to read this, and the goal will be that we construct the volcano. Very cool. Read a how-to guide. So this is a perfect example of why Lego instructions are just awesome. Read a Lego instruction, build a Lego. There you go. You had your reading and you had your goal. Read up on ancient Egypt, then create a tomb model or a 3-minute presentation. I would go more with the model. The presentation feels more laborious to me, but whatever. You can decide by yourself. Read about bugs. So you read about bugs and then you go out and find one. Like now that you read about this bug, we go on an adventure because we did this. And then there's actually a few more things that we could talk about here. And I think particularly there's one that I think is really good that anchors boys because it's as they read that it matters. So let's move on. I like that though. Core concept, associate a goal with the reading that you're doing. Although reading may become reading for its own sake, a way to get boys interested to begin with is to initially attach it to a goal. It may then continue through the rest of their life though, because you could see, well, I read this book so that I could create this thing. I read this book so that I could go into this particular field of study. I read this book because I want to fix my car. It doesn't ever need to stop that they would read because they accomplish a goal. But then if they start to read just because they like reading, well, all the better. That's cool. But there is no right way in this case. It's just that boys are particularly tuned into this. So the next one, and this is really important. It's kind of on the razor's edge. You can't bribe boys to read. So here's the problem. We often think that rewards, stickers, points, and badges will spark reading motivation, and at first they might. But studies have shown that extrinsic motivators can actually reduce a child's long-term interest in reading, especially when the reward becomes the goal. So this is called the over-justification effect. I did not know. When kids are rewarded for something they already might enjoy, their intrinsic motivation drops. The activity stops being mine and starts being yours, and something done for a prize, but not for me personally. So, and for boys who are already hesitant readers, that external focus can make things worse. Once the badge is earned, the book goes back on the shelf. They're like, I got the badge, that's all I was doing it for, who cares? So what you want to find, the fix for this, is that you get something that can be narratively based in terms of reward, emotionally resonant, and it's a part of the experience itself. So I was hyping this up before we actually arrived here. What I really enjoyed, well, I'll read this little bit of research first. A 2021 Journal of Educational Psychology study found that intrinsic motivators like story progression, choice, and agency led to deeper engagement, better recall, and longer reading sessions, especially for boys. So what exactly can that be? How can it be intrinsic? How is it in the story? And where it feels like they're being rewarded by their choices and their personal connection. I could not hype enough the value of choose your own adventures. So if you read a choose your own adventure story with a boy, where once you read several pages, it's then a choice at the bottom of the page that says, if you want to do this, progress the story in this way, go to this page. If you want to progress the story in this way, go to this page. I loved these. I think it was no mistake. And from what we can see from the research, it sounds like it's true for all boys that if you approach reading in this sort of branching narrative where they have agency over what's happening, they're going to have far better reading outcomes. They're going to be engaged for much longer. They're going to have much longer reading sessions. So however else you can do that, I just think that the choose your own adventures are a fantastic example of what's possible. But you could, I think even with the stickers, if it could be that the stickers you created were associated with the story. So it was like, you like this character in the story, let's make a sticker that represents that character, and then now you can decorate your book with that sticker. But it's because you wanted that character in the book to come to life that the sticker matters, as opposed to some sort of disassociative sticker where it's just like an apple. I don't care about apples. How is that a part of the story? Why would I be involved with this ridiculous nonsense? So connect them. That's what you want to do. You want to connect the reward to the reading, and you don't want to remove them from the reading by giving them this reward. Very, very important. Very interesting. So here I want to bring up like a little bit of success. I just want to talk about it. We've talked about a little bit the gap, how much they're struggling, the things that you can do, but I wanted to give a few positive outcomes from countries taking this seriously. And as I said at the beginning of the podcast, thinking it shouldn't be that boys conform to the system of education that we have currently. It's that the system that we have currently should conform to the particular style of learning that boys have. So here you go. Let's talk about it. The problem. Finland is a global literacy superstar. Its students consistently rank near the top of international reading assessments. Way to go, Finland. But even there, boys are slipping faster than girls. And they're not alone. Across OECD countries, the gender reading gap is widening, not closing. In most systems, boys trail girls by a full year by age 15, regardless of income, classroom size, or technology use. Fascinating. This tells us something critical. Even great schools aren't enough. If the system doesn't meet the boys where they are, it leaves them behind. As I say, it's not meeting their needs, which are specific. Here's the fix. Some countries are fighting back, not by lowering standards, not by rebuilding engagement, but by rebuilding engagement around how boys actually learn. Surprise, surprise, this is what works. In Finland, the Lukuinto initiative transformed libraries into boy-friendly reading hubs using comics, gaming narratives, and male mentors. They made reading social, not solitary, and designed for action and interest. In the UK, the Premier League Reading Stars program partnered with top football clubs to tie literacy to sports culture. Players shared favorite books, read aloud on video, and set reading challenges tied to club loyalty. The results, this is wild, in one National Literacy Trust study, 2022, boys in the program gained 6+ months of reading progress in just 10 weeks, that's crazy, and motivation scores rose even higher. What these countries got right is that they treated it as a cultural shift. This can occur everywhere. We can also say that it's not just the responsibility of the classroom. We can do this in all aspects of our society. You could say it begins at home, it can go onto the sports field, and it can be a part of the classroom, but it is a shared responsibility if we want to have an impact on our boys' reading levels. They brought in real male role models. I think that's fantastic. It's this idea of representation, of being able to identify with reading role models. No surprise that that worked. We've talked through the research. And they made reading about something boys already cared about. So sports, comics, games, adventure, movement, all of these different topics that we discussed. So this is really a confirmation of these points that we've spoken through now. When you put them into practice, what happens? Well, boys are getting in, what is that? It's 4, 8, it's like 2.5 months that they got 6 months progress. So if you try these out, if you implement them, it is profound, the changes that young boys are going to have in their reading levels. We got the research. We know that it's effective. It is far beyond the theoretical. So pretty cool. Hopeful, in fact. I think this next one is great. I like this, and it's simple. Boys read better with a buddy. So here's the problem. Reading is often framed as a solo activity, quiet, still, and individual, but for many boys, especially in the early years, this setup clashes with how they best engage. It's not just about energy levels, it's about motivation and connection. Studies show that boys are more likely to persevere with reading when it feels collaborative, and when they can share it, act it out, or connect in a social experience. The fix that we have then. Pairing boys with reading companions, human or otherwise, this is interesting, I'll share this detail at the end, it's great. Human or otherwise boosts comprehension, motivation, and persistence. Research by Escal, 2013, found that buddy-based reading, where children read alongside a pure adult, improves decoding and fluency, especially for boys who struggle alone, but it goes deeper. When reading is framed as an interaction, boys become more emotionally invested. This includes peer partnerships, teacher-child dialogic reading, we'll define dialogic in a moment, interactive storytelling with avatars or puppets. This is so cool, I love this. Okay, here's what I wanted to get to, and we'll cover the others as well. So in one study, reading to a dog, yes, an actual trained animal, resulted in significantly longer reading sessions among boys. The non-judgmental presence reduced anxiety and increased focus. I think that's wild. Digital interventions are showing similar trends. Tools that feature engaged, responsive characters, not just animations, keep boys reading longer and asking more questions. The character becomes a co-explorer, not a narrator. That's cool. Here's the takeaway. Reading doesn't have to be solitary to be effective. For many boys, the opposite is true. Make reading social, and you'll make it stick more. So I'll top this all off to say that it's just more evidence to read to your kids and how crucial that is, that if you're reading with them, they're buddy readers. They love it. They can read with dogs, and this improves their fluency and focus and so on. So it could never be more important. And while I said it's really important that you would have a father that would read to their son, of course, mothers absolutely should read as well. It's this sort of companionship that you get from it. And we've talked a little bit about pair reading and the sort of bonding that occurs because of it. So you're not just going to get the benefit in their fluency, you're going to get the benefit in your personal relationship with them if you do this. So let's head on to one more we got here. And I think this is awesome. Again, it can make things more fun, and it addresses this interactive element that really supports boys' style of reading. So here's the problem. In the early years, boys often lag behind in verbal development, and that gap shows up in reading. Here's what most parents and teachers miss. How you read to a child matters as much as how often. It's like, oh, really? Interesting. So flat, passive reading, especially from screens, doesn't do much for engagement in boys. In particular, they need emotion and interaction to connect. So here's the idea. I said that I would explain what is dialogic reading. So dialogic reading is where the adult actively involves the child with questions, predictions, and character voices, and this will dramatically boost comprehension, especially for boys. So it's not a complex concept, but it's just something that you might not think about to do while you're reading with your child, which is to involve them in the process. If you're not going out of the narrative, you're simply discussing it with them. So let's say something happened to a character in a book, and you just ask your kid, what do you think how do you think that makes that character feel? That's great. That would be really good. Well, they get this reflection, and oh, I think because this happened, maybe they're angry about that. Okay, you think they're angry. How do you think they would react to that? It's to be able to have a dialogue, because their thoughts and their feelings and their, analysis of the story matters with what's going down in the story. It's going to deepen their immersion, deepen their connection, give them a reason to continue with experiencing the story. And I love the idea that reading aloud is really good. Again, really appreciative to my dad, the fact that he read all those books to me. It was awesome. And I think it's really cool where if you're a little bit bored, that if you want to add voices in, this can go a long way to also engaging your child even more, especially boys. If you put on funny voices, if you put on serious voices, that characterization of the story will get them hooked much more easily. And so then I could add in as well here that we shouldn't be afraid of, and it's actually really good, this initial just reading to a child. And if you don't have the time to read to them, what you could do instead is have them listen to audiobooks. So audiobooks, when it's read, I think it was a figure from the last podcast that I did, that in 1,000 words, it contains 30% more variety in vocabulary than simple everyday conversation. So where you might think, oh, well, are they really getting a benefit to read while they're listening? They are in terms of their vocabulary comprehension, because they're getting exposed to more variety. So reading to your kid, a great way to start building their comprehension and fluency. And I love the idea as well, this engaging avatars, that if say for example, you could try this, if your child has a plushie that they really like, maybe make that plushie the narrator of the story that night. And you could try out different voices for that plushie. And I'm telling you, your kid's gonna probably enjoy that, because they have the emotional interaction with the plushie in the first place. It's a great source of comfort. But now this plushie has come to life and is reading the story to them. So there's a whole bunch of ways that you can involve them with the reading, with the dialogic reading. There's ways that you can implement your voice, get characters that they're more comfortable with involved with it, and make it a lot more fun. So expressiveness in reading really matters to boys. The science is clear. When boys hear stories told with voice, life, and interaction, they listen longer, remember more, and start to care. So boys aren't bad readers. They're underserved. From brain development to book selection, the system isn't built for them. But it can be. The research is clear, the tools exist, and the stakes are too high to ignore. If we meet boys where they are and show them what reading can be, we won't just close the gap. We'll raise a generation of readers who never fell behind in the first place. So I return here to what I said at the beginning, is that hand waving away that boys at young ages just aren't readers has totally missed the point. It's that our educational system has ignored the unique way in which boys best learn. And if we were to adapt to them, as opposed to expecting a 4-year-old kid to adapt to our school system, then we would have far more success. So I hope you enjoyed the podcast. This was a really interesting topic for me. And I think, to do justice, of course, because I'm interested in all kinds of the science, I'm really curious now, since I went and did the research for this, well, how is it that women how is it that little ladies best learn to read? I don't know. And that will be coming up in a future podcast. I really appreciate you tuning in. If you want to share your comments, like what are your children's most favorite books? You know, like what are your son's most favorite books? What do they enjoy reading? Is it a particular character? Let me know in the comments. If you're here on the YouTube channel checking out the podcast. I would love to know. Because as I say, as I'm going through these podcasts, I'm always making recommendations. I think the one today, the best one that I could give was maybe when they're a little bit older, I would recommend the absolute cultural phenomenon of Spawn. That's when they're older. That's going to be in their teens. But prior to that, if not from comic books, for graphic novels, that I would recommend you go with Terry Pratchett's Discworld. But I would love to get some other parent recommendations here into what has resonated with your children, and we'll get those, maybe be making a reading list that we can start with some of these future podcasts. But as I say, thank you very much for tuning in. Hug the ones you love, and I will catch you in the next episode.